Hello, friends, and welcome back again to Backyard Bible Study. In this particular segment, we continue with Friedheim's book, and this time what we're going to be taking a look at is what is the Bible? And as we take a look at that segment that he's got there, we're going to be encountering, a generalized approach, along with hopefully some of the specific questions that you bring. A reminder, many of the things that I share with you are directly from Friedheim's material. So if you have his book, you can find that. And I may make references as I go along to page numbers as well, if you like. As we get into what is the Bible, a lot of folks, when I grew up, when we would look at some of the Bibles when my mom and I lived alone, the Bible itself was revered. And it wasn't able to be thrown away. It wasn't able to be put on the ground. It was very much like the way a lot of people treat the American flag or any other flag important to them. You can't burn. The only way to dispose of something like that was to burn it. Well, that kind of biblical piety has its place. There is a great love for that sacred text. Now, what we recognize as well is the fact that the Bible is a book. It gets worn out, it gets used, gets loved, and then what do you do with it? Do you have to have some great ritual to dispense with it? Well, it depends on your piety, I suppose. What we do in our house is if we have a Bible that's worn out, we order a new one, and then that typically gets worn out as well. We'll be talking about what is the Bible here, and where we start is why are there so many different Bibles? There are all kinds of Bibles out there. And they all have particular purposes, it seems. There's a comic book Bible for kids that's absolutely wonderful. And it shows in comic book form some of the favorite Bible stories, all the way to things that are very, very intricate in their understandings and translations, like the New Revised Standard Version Bible. That's the one I have over here. The NRSV. We've got many of these at Lutheran Church of the Resurrection, and we've got plenty of those available for you to use. You can read along with those. Take one if you like, if you absolutely need that. Donate one if you have some extras, so that we can share those around with folks. But there are many different kinds of Bibles, and there are primarily two reasons for that, according to Friedheim. One, the translations that are out there. The original languages were Hebrew, Aramaic, which was what Jesus spoke, and Greek, the common language of the primary section of the world at that time. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Now, when you translate from any language to another, there are all kinds of different things that can come in with that. Even in our own language, words change over time. Many of us grew up with, come and eat supper. Others grew up with, it's dinner time. What's the difference between dinner and supper? I don't have a clue. I just love to eat. I want to come to either one. Doesn't matter. And make sure that chocolate is for dessert, by the way. So the one reason right off the bat is that we have all kinds of different translations from the biblical text. Now, another reason that we have so many different Bibles is because there are different versions, if you will. There are different books that have been added and those that have been left out. Protestant Bibles, for example, have 66 different books, and yet Roman Catholic books would have more. They would include things called the apocryphal books, Tobit and Judith and 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Maccabees and things like that, where Protestant Bibles often might have that as a separate section of the apocrypha, or pseudepigrapha if you want the Scrabble word to use there. Go ahead and try and spell that one. While the Bibles of all Christians contain different books, the Bibles are often held up still as sacred texts. They may be different, they may have more or less books, but they all focus on what God and God's message of hope is for people. All the Bibles nowadays are divided into verses in varying lengths, but that wasn't the case in its original languages. No, they didn't have that at all. In fact, all of those numbers, chapters, and verses, they were actually added in about the Middle Ages. Not when Jesus was around. Jesus didn't say, now, verse 2, feed the people. Verse 3, clean up after the people. Verse 4, please don't invite 4,000 people over to my house again for dinner, okay? Not unless you bring more. He didn't talk like that. Those things were added much later, and we need to keep that in mind. In fact, many of the biblical stories that we love about resurrection, and in fact all of the Gospels, were written after Jesus was crucified and resurrected. So it's written in light of those types of things. Some titles of the books refer to the authors, like Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Others refer to places, Paul's letters to the church at Rome, Galatia, Thessalonica, Ephesus. all of the churches at Corinth. And so we have different books titled in different ways. It's very often that we also have basic designations, a basic designation that wasn't there. Old Testament and New Testament, that wasn't there originally. The books of the Bible were written by all kinds of different authors over the course of well over 1,000 years. Well over 1,000 years. And many of those books were written, well, not written, excuse me, they were spoken, told over a period of time to their communities. And then over that hundreds of years, they finally got written down. Generally speaking, the historical background of the Bible ranges across nearly 2,000 years. 2,000 years. From as early as the second millennium BCE, which is about 2000 to 1750 BCE, to early in the 2nd century CE. Okay, some of you might know right off the bat, BCE and CE, yeah, it's Common Era and before the Common Era. We no longer use those terms BC, before Christ, and AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. We recognize we live in a global culture today, and so even those things shift. Most of the time period for the Bible was really the Old Testament. The last book of the Old Testament was actually probably written about 165 BCE. Now, in the New Testament, those books were actually written, the last one in the New Testament was probably written early in that 2nd century CE, about 125. And you can probably guess which that one was. Yep. This really ends our part 1 of getting into what is the Bible. And part 2 will pick up where we left off. Until next time, friends, God bless.